Good evening and welcome to Inexcess, the show for real people with real lives, dealing with the many gritty issues affecting us today. I'm George Williams. For those who haven't seen the show before, in active recovery, as they say, and in my search for recovery, we've created Inexcess, and we're going out and meeting the people in the front line, in treatment, in recovery. We're always pleased to meet people who have turned their lives around, who have reached rock bottoms and turned their life around in a way that they're having a healthy, happy life out there, connecting with a lot of people who view our shows, come to our audience and take part in us trying to improve the quality of life now more so than the one that we had before. My guests tonight, Jane Allen and John Gillen, and that was a tongue twister that I've got right for the first time today, have been to the same dark places and reached the same rock bottoms. Between them, they've written a book, The Secret Disease of Addiction. And we're all fascinated this evening as to the reality of the biological, that's one of the words Roger's given me to use, the biological connection. What's going on when we pump stuff into us? What's going on in our brains, our minds? How is it affecting us emotionally? How is it affecting us behaviourally? We're going to talk about spirituality, I hope, tonight. This is show 9 of series 3. And I don't think we've covered it once yet, have we? In this series, spirituality. And it is in the book, and John and Jane are really going to bring it into the show this evening. And then hopefully this evening we're also going to talk about their centre, their lodge, Affinity Lodge, and how their knowledge and experience has been turned around and put into practice, and what the programmes are, the successes, what's working. I'm going to get on with it. I'm going to talk about what's on tomorrow night's show later at the end probably, but it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jane Allen and John Gillen. John, Jane, thanks for coming, because you've made a big effort to come up, haven't you? You've come from...
It's a pleasure.
Well, what's nice when you say that, but you have made a huge effort, and I hope you've had a really good day today. It has been really sunny, and you've relaxed, and we've looked after you. What we're fascinated to know, really, and our viewers will be tonight, is to have a background as to what was your journey. We often talk on the shows are about journeys. What was the journey that brought you together to write a book? What was the beginning for you?
Well, I suppose it all really began with myself, George, in the year 2002, when I finally reached that rock bottom that you mentioned, and the readiness factor, acceptance that change was needed. And it was when I finally entered into a NHS psychiatric ward, like a lot of chronic alcoholics like myself do, that I really believed when I was getting in there for the 3 weeks that somebody in there would finally tell me what had happened to me, because I knew something had changed within myself, and I was not drinking for the happy hours any longer. I was facing many sad years, and when I went in with that hope that finally the psychiatrists, the doctors, nurses, or whoever it was would be able to sort of define and clarify something that had happened within me. But unfortunately, I get great care, which I'm obviously very grateful for. But these questions were never put to me, and when I left the care that was given to me in there, I desired to find out. So what I'd done was, I had never read a book in my entire life. I started visiting my local library, and I started getting some information regarding my substance was alcohol. So I started reading books and started to process some of the information from there, which then led me to the biggest reference library in Europe, the Mitchell Library in Glasgow. And I would find myself in there every day, seeking new information.
Thirst for knowledge?
Thirst for knowledge and a thirst for a change in my life, recovery, call it whatever you like. But I knew I had a deep desire to find out, because I knew something had changed. And through reading these books, probably were designed for more academic doctors and so forth, I was understanding the mechanics and the setup and the changes that take place within the brain. From there I entered towards psychology, and from psychology to spirituality, and that took me a good year, self-study. And when I found this information, it began to change my own understanding of what happened to me. I was beginning to get some information that could make sense in my life at the time, and I just really wanted to tell the world about that.
For people watching the show tonight, what had happened to you?
What happened to me was that I had no longer a sense of my own free will. I was taking alcohol to feel normal. I needed a drink to feel normal, which I thought would be normal, which obviously is not normal. So that mechanism, why it was never a matter of choice with me, like, well, I drink or will I leave it? It was a need.
And now, had you considered many times before about stopping?
I had been down a few routes, but nothing would work for me, and maybe that was just the simple fact that I was not ready for any other approach. But when that time came, this is the route I went down, the route of educating myself to understand what actually happened to me. And the information was, I became so engrossed with it that I just really wanted to tell the whole world about it. So I met another recovering friend of mine, a dear friend called John McLean, and who was struggling with the disease at the time, and just like Bill Wilson and the doctor, the two of us sat with each other, and I was telling him about what I was finding out, and he took the meaning of that, and he began to organise his thinking in this way, and both of us then opened a rehab called Abbey Care Foundation. It's quite a small exclusive rehab in Scotland, which still operates today. And from there, I tried always to, how am I going to take this information that's changed my life and put it in words in the form of a book. So I spoke to several authors who were prepared to ghostwrite the book for me, but we could never get the process going.
Connect? We
could never connect, no. They were always wanting to change things and stuff like that, and basically hide the truth. But that came up to the point 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, when I met Jane, who was seeking recovery herself, and I started to sit down with Jane and put this information towards Jane, and well, it was quite a big connection we made. We're still together.
Still connected.
Yeah, and you know, it's
meant to be.
Things, you know, life is a funny way. You kind of working on it. You know, Jane's the academic brain behind the book, and it was finally I found the right person, and Jane is the academic brain behind putting all this information down in the book. So,
okay, well, Jane?
Well, I simply say in the book, I'm his scribe. I just internalised everything that he taught me and everything else that I read. Sorry. My own story. I struggled probably for 20-odd years. I was a fully functioning alcoholic come addict, because for the last 13 years, whilst I was using the alcohol, you know, started off with the happy years, and it went to the comfort effect that I talk in the book. Reward, you know, putting the kids to bed, have a drink. All my drinking would be done when they were asleep. But of course, as kids grow up, you know, why is mummy falling asleep? And I would fall asleep outside because I didn't want the kids to see me, and I used to smoke and drink outside. And of course, as they got older, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, they would find me asleep outside. So I knew the alcohol was, the progression of it was getting worse and worse and worse. I knew changes in my behaviour were happening. I knew something was happening within my brain. And then the last 13 years of all that, my back went. I've had 4 back operations, and I was put on the most massive amount of painkillers, Valium and Coproximol, and then this and then that and the other, and I ended up a junkie. I mean, it was all prescribed. I never got anything, you know, off the internet or anything. They were all prescribed.
One of our guests previously, Lee, in series 2, spoke about being a slave to prescribed drugs.
And doctors do not, probably because they don't really understand themselves. They don't explain. I mean, if my doctor had said to me, you get a little label which says, avoid alcohol, may cause drowsiness. They don't say these tablets are like having yet another bottle of wine. You know, when you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're absolute agony and you simply can't move and you can't sleep, that little label which says avoid alcohol may cause drowsiness seems like a really good idea. You know, I'll have a couple of glasses of wine with my Coproximol. I mean, 4 times at least I actually felt myself like floating and thinking, please God, I really didn't mean taking those extra 4, because your mind gets befuddled with drink. We all know that. And you average 8, and then you take another 2, and you still can't sleep in the middle of the night, so you take another 2, and then you have 2 glasses of wine, and I ended up a junkie, and they were actually harder to come off. I was having hot sweats for a good 6 months after that I'd given up the alcohol.
On the bottle, why were you drinking when you look back?
The alcohol started, I didn't start drinking until I was actually, which was quite late, 24. Simply for the party effect. I didn't drink actually for confidence. You know, like a lot of people say, I drank simply for the party effect. And I entered into a lifestyle that was all party. And for 2 years, that's all we did, was party every single night, every single weekend, and my tolerance level went up and up and up and up and up and up. And I started on special brew, from one who'd never had like a sip of sherry when she was a youngster. I started on special brew, champagne and whiskey. So my tolerance level, it must have hammered my brain within those 2 years. And I've very quickly passed that invisible line to addiction. And I actually went into a rehab, and I mean, it affects everything. It affects your behaviour, it affects moods, it affects eating. So the rehab that I went into, they had 5 floors, and they put me on each one consecutively. And at the end of the 3.5 weeks, they said, "There's nothing wrong with you, go home."
How did that make you feel?
Bemused, because I knew there was something wrong, and I actually knew it resided in my head.
I remember the doctor telling me, I always remember I was young, in my early 20s, and the doctor telling me, they'd done one of those bloody liver tests, and the doctor gave me the green light, there's nothing wrong with your liver. As soon as he told me that, I just went, it's the green light to go straight back out again. It probably would have stopped me anyway if he told me it was bad.
No.
But the fact that he told me I was okay.
And that, unfortunately, is the problem, that everybody concentrates on the physical symptoms. Is your liver all right? You know, this, that and the other. And it's in our thinking that this deteriorates our whole quality of life. Every single perception that we have about things is screwed up because of the misuse of mood-altering substances. it actually distorts our perception of reality. And I look back now and I think the things that I used to worry about and I would drink on, you know, for comfort, for this, for that, for whatever reason, I look back now and I think, well, a lot of that was of my own making. They were the stories that I was telling myself, but I couldn't see the reality of people, places and things because of this befuddled...
If we go to the book then, Jane and John, and let us get an idea of... On the front cover it says what it is, The Secret Disease of Addiction. Can we talk about when we're pumping, if we take the two biggies, drink and drugs, when we're pumping them into ourselves, what's going on? From a scientific, from a biochemical connection.
Well, the secret disease, one of the reasons we named the book that way is that for many reasons, but you know, the chemicals act secretly, and you know, people, you feel good when you take a mood altering substance. You feel good, so it's a secret effect. You don't really understand what's happening with you, but anybody taking a mood altering substance, the first thing that happens is a change of perception. So anybody's perception automatically changes as a result of any mood altering substance, and that means that any reality experiences that's coming in are distorted. So whatever the experience, anybody, it's not the way it's meant to be. And of course, if this is happening on a daily basis, in my case it was half a lifetime, when the drug's taken away and I walk into reality to that brain is completely very scary territory. So in alcohol's effect, firstly, because that was the drug of choice for myself, the brain only sees alcohol as a depressant drug to itself. So when the brain's depressed, it will do anything it can to get back to homeostasis. So it releases excitatory neurohormones and neurotransmitters in order to regain balance. And as soon as that happens, we lose the party effect, the euphoric feeling, and we just pick up another drink. Now this continues. Then the brain starts to make alterations in itself, so they're now starting to happen in the brain structural, functional changes.
Because we spoke today, didn't we? And the thing that fascinated me the most was about how our brains have this self-preservation. It's protecting itself above and beyond everything else. So in its protective mode, it's sending out more chemicals to balance itself, to get back to an equilibrium. Is that the right?
Yeah, perfect word. That's all the brain's doing. I mean, the brain will adapt. There's something known as neuroplasticity, so the brain's like plastic. So the brain will always adapt to any environment it stays in the longest. So alcohol and any other mood-altering substances are false information to the brain, and it always seeks homeostasis, so it always is trying to correct itself. So as this process is happening, there's a part of the brain called the reward circuit. So all addictions are based on that circuit, which is a pleasure, reward-seeking side of the brain. Now that, after a very short time, probably 2 to 3 years, that complete circuit is hijacked into believing that drugs or drink are good for its own survival. So the mechanics of addiction in the beginning, the drive starts to become from the survival point of view, from the brain's point of view. So it now starts to recognise that drinking drugs are good for its own survival. So in any chronic alcoholic addict, each day, that, for the brain's perspective, if the brain does not get what it seeks to find that homeostasis, for the brain's point of view, every day it's under threat of death.
And that's what made a huge change in me when I met John, because I went on to go to several other rehabs all over the world and see psychiatrists and this one and that one and counsellor, and nobody even hit on remotely what exactly was wrong with me. Yes, they would go on about my behaviour and they'd go on about the past, you know, and I'd delve into everything freely, but I knew there was something more to it. And then I met John. I mean, I've got 3 girls and I would chop my arms and legs off for them if they needed them. But you put a drink inside of me and it's like those girls don't exist. And they used to say to me, "Mummy, you love the drink more than you love us." And I knew that wasn't true. And it used to break my heart, and I couldn't understand. And John put the reward circuit up, and I saw hijack brain, and I went, that's what's been happening all these years, and it made complete sense.
My interpretation of, in 60 seconds, of what went on was, in the early days with my drinking, it was a warm feeling, it was a comforting feeling. Yeah, it made me, I suppose, it made me feel different, and I liked that difference it made me feel. Not realising that the confusion that I was always feeling, I've been a really confused person most of my life. And trying to work out theories and trying to do this and big plans and big visions, but being really confused. It started off as my friend, and it gave me a warm feeling. And it gave me something that privately I could sit there and think in a relaxed rather than a highways and freeways way of thinking. It relaxed me down. In the end of my drinking days, I had this dual thing going on whereby my body was craving the drink. The addicts, the part of me that just craved it 24/7. As soon as I woke up, no matter where it was, no matter what time of day it was about the drink. And yet my body was rejecting it. And I was in a worse state then than I'd ever been over 25 years. There was a real conflict going on. What I'm intrigued, and I'm hoping, you know, our viewers will be, is you talk about the yo-yo effect, which goes on. I understand you're not just speaking about it today, but is this yo-yo effect of us doing things for maybe one reason and what we wanted to achieve, but our minds and the chemicals.
The yo-yo effect is the chemicals going on. I mean, you have a drink and you feel good, but the brain, as we said earlier, it would do anything in its power to keep itself going. So alcohol's a depressant. So you'll get that euphoria, and then you'll start to come down. The brain will instantly start making excitatory chemicals, so it pushes it back up. So you find some sort of level and balance. But then we lose the party effect when that happens, because the brain's getting back to homeostasis. So what do we use to start to lose the party effect, so we'll have more? Now, every time we do that, you know, depending on how high you go up with that pushing the drug, the brain has to adapt, and that's where we get into receptors. The brain will form all the receptors that are there ready waiting, and they'll bring out new ones. So I've drawn them, my window cleaner, which I showed him the little diagrams one day. I said, "Does this make sense to you?" And he said, "They look like teeth," so I call them teeth now. But it shows you exactly why we can't just ever have one ever again. Once you've crossed that invisible line, it will show you exactly why, because the brain will open up new receptors.
So it instantly recognises,
accommodate all these neurotransmitters going backwards and forwards.
I would say, to answer that question's a wee bit more simple, George. When the drug's taken away, there is a backlash and an explosion of the excitatory chemicals within the brain, which were being produced when the brain was under the effects of the depressant drug. Now the drug's away. And that is, I think most people recognise that as the withdrawal period, the abstinence syndrome, and that's when the drinking probably begins in the morning. When you feel that in the morning, when the sickness is stopped, or the old hangover, and now the drinking drugging begins in the morning. So this is very, very difficult to track, because this disease progresses geometrically. So it does not progress like 1, 2, 3, 4. It tends to go 2, 6, 4, 8, and you know it's very difficult to see yourself slipping towards that invisible line. But the invisible line happens when the brain, in its great wisdom, decides to grow new terminals to accommodate the cycle drug. So when that brain changes and produces new terminals, that's when the trouble really starts. That's when people cross the line. That's when addiction really takes place.
Yeah, I think is that the line whereby one day there's the period where you feel as though you're in control of it, but then there comes a day when you realise that it's in control of you.
Absolutely.
It's when our thoughts are more about clock watching and wanting a drink, and because there's a shift, isn't there?
Change.
Yeah, with me, I understand. You know, it happened very quickly, but the quickly was still, it built up to it. I started off when it was a pleasure and I enjoyed it.
It's a tolerance.
Yeah, it was a tolerance. It was whatever was going on within me emotionally, how I was thinking. Drink just hit a spot that I really enjoyed.
But that's different to a real biological need for relief that you mentioned. That it is a real biological need for relief, and people don't like, particularly in this country, talking about addiction as a disease. But there are real structural and functional changes that are acquired. It's an acquired. We're not born with it. It's acquired by overuse of a mood-altering substance. But it's real structural and functional changes that are made within the brain that can never be undone with those receptors. And they create, together with all the stress that goes on, you know, from outside, which interfere with our autonomic nervous system. You know, we will perceive things and our brain will simply go to red and say, I've got the perfect solution, drink. It's always worked before. You know, we train it for nigh on 20-odd years to respond to that.
You see, we would define this condition a disease or disorder. I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that this is an actual brain disease that expresses itself with compulsive behaviour. And that's the sad fact.
Well, we don't catch it off toilet seats, do we?
No, we don't. We have a real, well, in my case, I had a great time acquiring this disease. Well,
it's an apprenticeship.
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from this, and the quicker you accept this, then you can start stopping the excuses and start working with a prescription to manage this disease. I mean, the down-regulation and the up-regulation within that reward circuit, which recognises the basic needs as being good, that is addiction. I mean, that's only the start of the problem.
Yeah, I was going
to go behind all that.
Well, going behind that, I can only speak from my own experience. And in some ways, looking back, I could have had all the knowledge in the world. I could have had all the science in the world back then. The truth of the matter was, when I wanted a drink, I wanted a drink.
Of course.
Yeah. And that
it's telling you it needs it for its very own survival.
Yeah, you know, I'd have long periods where I wouldn't drink. I was in abstinence, and I was, you know, in abstinence recovery. But once that feeling came, through a whole host of feelings and emotions that I now recognise were going on and building up. And I spoke on one of the shows once that it was a simple thing that triggered me off. And I don't want to detract from your book, but a simple thing that triggered me off once. I hadn't drank for 5 years, Tony, in the 90s. And I remember someone saying to me, gosh, all that willpower that you've got, and you're so in control, and, you know, and you've so got your act together. And I just had this image of myself being normal. And it terrified me. And that old rock and roll, flying by the seat of my trousers, 2 fingers up to the world. They didn't see that, which was the bit that I wanted the world. You know, I had more than a spring. I wear snakeskin boots, you know, it says a lot, doesn't it? I'm that type of person. So to sort of be put into a normal bracket terrified me. 5 years, went out and picked up a drink. What happened, though, which is what fascinating listening to you tonight, was that the 5 years just felt like 5 minutes, because the feelings, I picked up from my last drink, it was frightening. The whole, it was like in slow motion, this connection between picking it up and it coming and then it hitting me, and it was just like pow, and it just became alive again. Now I knew there was going to be a whole host of devastation that was going to follow. But believe you me, at that time, it just didn't matter. I would take all the consequences in that moment. But it's right in your mind. It's like a...
Well, those little receptors are already waiting.
They've been waiting 5 years.
All the little terminals, and you give it a tiny little bit, and it's like, hey, lads, come on, we want some more. That's what do you mean that's not going to fill up all these?
Well, you said something today. You've never met a person. It's strange. How do you have one drink?
I don't know anybody. I've never been with somebody who has one drink. I mean, what I'm picking up for you here, George, is, I mean, the bottom line of this book here is the secret disease of addiction, a disease which tells us it isn't one. This is a disease that you have when you're sober. Drinking and drugging is not a disease.
Okay.
That's a symptom that there's something wrong with you when you're sober. And we sometimes, when people move and put the substance down, this disease sort of tries to correct itself, and it really does quite quick, and then you have a tendency to think you're well. You know, and when you start thinking you're well, you start thinking that you can just have 2 or 3 drinks.
I think when we're dry or we're clean, that's a length of time. All the people in here that got problems like us, we see time as a sobriety or clean. And maybe we've not done much work on the inside.
No.
You know, we're still very much living in we can still be living in quite an erratic way, but we're not drinking, and we see that as we're really sorted. And I remember on many occasions, I remember after probably 2 years thinking, I'm a different person now to what I was back then. My life is different. I'm not under as much pressure, and I'm more steady now, and I'm working, and I'm not up to no good. I'm not that person that I used to be. Went back out again because I thought I've changed enough. I thought that I'd grown up more. I thought that I had a better grip on life. I wasn't under pressure and stress or whatever else it may be. Went back out again, and for me, my language is it's the calling. You get this voice telling you, "Go on, George. Go on. You know you want to. You'd love to. You'll really enjoy yourself."
But the psychological implications in this disease that we've acquired a whole bundle of hardwired thought patterns to suit the disease. And you know,
I'll go along with that. Yeah.
When you flash back into that old pattern, you're back in that reality, and that reality convinces you that you're well, and having one drink is okay. I mean, it's a total distortion, a whole bundle of negative thought patterns that always lead us back to picking up the first drink. So, I mean, you really got to realise that stopping drinking is the easy part, and the reward-seeking behaviour is could be termed addiction. Addiction is not the problem here. This disease will go beyond that, and there is changes it's made in the autonomic nervous system which we don't control. So if we flash back, if we don't change the thinking, we flash back. It's like somebody who suffers post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the same symptoms occur as what you see in that person. Yet we will go straight back to where we were. So the thinking with this disease has to change.
Well, triggers do that, don't they?
Well, triggers.
Very subtle triggers. I mean, there's the obvious, you know, standing in the queue at Tesco's, and you know, you're getting more and more agitated, and you see the bottle of wine sitting there. It's like, oh yeah, I'll have one of those as well, please. You know, because you're agitated because you're standing in the queue. But I've come to learn about my body, of how my body, and my body will always tell me before the thoughts start what's going on, that of all the stimulus and all the stuff that's coming in from the environment, noises, sights, sounds, smells, you know, everything is being processed. A tiny percentage will actually, you know, register in the brain. The rest is all done on memory. So I might hear something that is actually relevant to 5 years ago, but my body will perceive it and feel threatened. And then that will start, and then the thoughts will start. But because I'm aware of what's going on and I connect my heart to my head, then I can say, hang on a minute, that's all old stuff. And like a computer, I'll go press delete and I'll get rid of it. But years ago, you know, my first attempts at recovery, and believe me, I had many, I didn't know any of this stuff to watch what was going on inside and watch what was going on in my head. And every single day I will reflect on the day and then reduce my tension level right back down so that I've got that nice balance to start the next day. I don't carry one thing onto another, because I've got in the book a tension thermometer. Sure as eggs are eggs, if I have one hectic week, then another hectic week and another hectic week, and I don't watch what's going on in here, and more importantly what's going on there, I will want to pick up a drink.
Stress plays a big part in all of
It's a disease of stress and tension. This disease creates a maladaptation between the organism and the environment. And when the drug's taken away and the organism moves back to normal reality, all the information from reality, the brain does not know how to cope with that. So standing in a queue in Tesco's, that delayed tension, or waiting on a bus, will drive the addict to seek relief.
Quite often, and again in my own experience, the reality in looking back was that actually a long period before I would pick up a drink, the signs were already showing. I can see that now.
Yeah, the thinking changes.
The thinking change, yeah. Thinking had changed probably months before.
Yeah.
It has a whole load of neural networks precisely placed in the brain to accommodate the disease. So that thinking, that total distortion in thinking has to change. Thoughts create realities, but you know, although it's a brain disease, once understood, it's a very treatable brain disease. So treatment works, recovery works. But the reason we have wrote the book is we've wrote it in simple baby language that anybody can understand. I mean, I ain't, or neither is Jane, paying justice to the actual information that's in the book. And there's also a visual representation of the acquirement of this disease, where we've used 3D animations, where we take the trip inside the brain and actually see how the changes are made, and how by getting a new way of thinking is half the battle. What we're discussing here is psychobiology. The psycho bit of the disease is the thinking part. The other part is the easier part. That's about making lifestyle changes in order to reduce the tension in your life in the beginning. After a while, the maladaptation to the environment begins to straighten itself out. But there's no cure to this disease. So it means that your normal, the way you were designed, and everybody's thresholds of dealing with stress and tension vary. But whatever that threshold was, whatever that natural design was, then you it's reduced by half. So any added tension on that puts you at the peak point where you need relief. So people relapse for the slightest little things. So it's a disease where you really have to understand exactly how you manage this. It's in the management, and definitely knowing drinking and drugging is not a disease. This is a disease you've got when you're sober. So for anybody listening to this show tonight, anybody moving towards recovery, or anybody just entering into recovery, you have to know that each day, without that drug of choice, whatever it may be, it's a precious day. But if you can understand that this maladaptation eventually straightens itself out, but it maybe takes 6 months, it maybe take a couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at Luton Airport on Monday. I was flying up to Abbey Care to do some work up there, and I walked in, and I was running a little bit late, and at the security there was a massive queue. Now, when that information hits my brain, and I'm sober now 7.5 years, and I've done a lot of things, and I work in myself on a continued daily basis. I cannot avoid that environmental situation. Now, because of the queue, the delay, all that information, my brain starts processing that, and I start to feel the tension. Now, I'm watching everybody else, about 50 to 100 people there, and they're all getting agitated. You can see it.
Oh, you feel the energy?
You see it.
You pick up on that as well.
So when that hits me, my brain quickly learns to say, well, I don't know what to do here. I'm under threat. And I feel this disease, and I will always feel it for the rest of my days, because there's no cure. And I feel the need for relief coming on. But the thinking has changed in me, so automatically I've rerouted it somewhere else.
You can process it differently.
Right, so it automatically goes to the new compartment rather than the old, which tells me the solution is to pick up a drink. Now, if that situation had happened to me 3 weeks sober, you can better believe that environmental experience would have led me to pick up a drink. So people relapse for the simple fact of being ignorant to the scientific... I mean, science knows... This is no cunning, baffling disease any longer. That science knows about this disease. It knows everything about it. It's got we know the fundamentals. So if we can educate ourselves to learn and to accept that this disease is started voluntary and accept the responsibility for it, then our lives can change.
That plays a big part in it.
Absolutely.
Responsibility. There's no one to blame. It's all in our own hands. I want to talk about spirituality in a moment, but I'm just curious if, Tony, have you got something to add or ask?
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me, and like I do understand in my own recovery, because I've probably been a lot like yourself, looking at, do you know what I mean, the biophysical type of things. But what you're saying, like the void part, that when we haven't got the drug or the alcohol inside us, there's that void there. Do you know what I mean? From that bit, that hypothalamus, you know. You know what I mean? Give me serotonin, dopamine kind of pleasure chemicals, and I'm away. And in my using, obviously the tolerance goes up, and the new webs build that sort of combat, like you say, the chemical imbalances. So it could be the same as someone who's diabetic. There'll be a blood flow kind of, you know, because of the diabetes, and it affects the brain and the blood from your heart as well. I never knew none of that. Do you know what I mean? I just knew that when I picked up, the void was filled. Do you know what I mean? And when I read that, like when you're born as a baby, there's a little bit that comes out in your brain that makes you crave milk. And then in the beginning it's a survival mechanism, and it reduces and goes back once your needs are met permanently.
Well, you wean a child off it, don't you, as well?
Yeah. But, and you go on to solids and all that. Yeah. But there is an element that makes that dependent addict, where they have the one drink or the one drug, and that little bit comes right out again, creates that pathway, that neural pathway, and it stays there. And this is where, you know, there is people out there that will always have this void feeling without a chemical, and then they get into recovery, whatever type of recovery, and then they learn to understand the spirituality side of things, of filling that void. And you can give it a meaning, but you need to understand that, you know, these chemical imbalances, we don't eat right, we don't do right, you know what I mean, which affects the brain. We don't know all this.
I think for me, Tony, in some ways, I spent a long time in my earlier years of recovery, actually I've got to tell you, not being bothered to know where, why, how, or whatever. I just took it for granted. This is how I am. Yeah. I didn't really want to relate it to what went on in my youth, the feelings and emotions and a whole host of things. I wasn't interested. Actually, maybe the difference in this time around in my life is I'm fascinated about a whole host of things. And in search of recovery this time is working much more strongly and more powerfully than ever before.
And one of the things that I learned in my own recovery is that I'm okay. Alcohol and drugs are okay. My attachment to them, with the chemical receptors, do you know what I mean, are not. Do you know what I mean? So when I pick up, I've got a muscle memory. I've got a pathway already ingrained now there. So when I pick up, I'm right back there. It's like going to the gym and...
Well, it's like switching a light on, I should imagine.
Well, I mean...
Is it as simple as that? It's like switching a light on once it hits?
I mean, addiction, really, if you take addiction out of the picture, once the substance is put away to the side, that takes care of the addictive side of things. Okay, so now we're moving on into the deeper level now. Everybody has there's what you call HPA axis in the body. Now that HP axis has dysregulation in it. So any stress factor, we just cannot deal with the slightest thing. So we have a term where we use, when the drug's put away, we are now stark raving sober, agitated, irritated, startled reactions, always at the peak point of tension. Now that is the disease. That is the disease. So addiction does not come be the problem any longer. You have neurobiologically changed, and the maladaptation to the environment, anything can trigger it. Standing waiting in a bus can trigger it. Somebody clapping their hands can trigger it. With that old thinking, if you flash back in there, nothing stops you. We're talking about a disease here that there's no other stronger bond than a mother to its children. There's no other instinct more powerful than that. And this disease will destroy that relationship, where you see the afflicted person abandoning her own kids for the pursuit of a drug.
Well, because we have a sense of help.
Now, that ain't just psychological.
It's a survival thing. We have a sense of helplessness. We crucify ourselves, for the want of a better saying, over feeling selfish. So we've got these conflicts going on all of the time.
The brain is the most selfish organ in the entire universe. All the brain its main focus is for other. It doesn't worry about nothing else other than its own survival. You know, that's all it cares about. Now, you got to try to maybe understand that, you know, the totality of yourself is just not your brain. So there's a way of looking at yourself and looking at this situation as we move probably closer into spirituality. Now, that brain has changed, but we can work with the brain if we start to understand the body, everything about us. We have, it's ridiculous to say, but we have an emotional bond with this chemical. We have evolved it and we have an emotional bond.
A deep.
Yeah, because the brain recognises the basic needs as being good. What we're talking about is friendship, thirst, sex, hunger. Now that is the basic form of spirituality. Through your own motivation, any human being who obtains these things should feel good. You should feel comfort. Now that system has been hijacked, and the only thing that brain recognises is good for its own survival is the drug. Now, as we move towards spirituality, I mean, personally speaking, I really don't know or understand how a prescription for this disease, if it's going to work, it's got to include spirituality and acceptance of spirituality, because the brain is hardwired for spirituality. It's hardwired, where even from a circular point of view, it's hardwired for spirituality. So when we have the ability to perceive that we never die, the brain is pretty okay with itself. So even through evolution, it's hardwired itself for that basic belief that there's a part of us that never dies.
This might seem like a really naive question, but what does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality to me is a feeling, and it's a good feeling. I mean, we talk about God in the book because there's no point in, we don't talk about higher powers. We talk about God. I don't know what God is, but I just know that by breaking that emotional bond with the chemical through acceptance of the truth that I have connected into something bigger than myself, and it's in my heart. It ain't in my brain. So I deal with my heart. If we could understand that it's the heart, it's the heart that starts beating in a fetus even before the brain is even formed. So that's the closer initiator to any divine understanding. So everything in recovery is about feeling. See, it ain't about thinking. This has got nothing to do with the thinking part of the brain. That's totally distorted. So we have to go within ourselves to start feeling our way around into recovery.
Well, love, in my books, overrides everything.
Love, right.
Love.
Feeling.
Yeah, whatever it may be for, but, you know, that feeling, the honeymoon period of being in love, overrides everything.
Yeah.
You can stop drinking, you can stop taking drugs, you can.
Well, for me, it's a meaning.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like my meaning is my spirituality. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
and you know, it gives me a what and a why, and it gives me a balance. Do you know what I mean? I've had to learn it, and like you say, you know, the tensions, the you know, without talking all the biophysical bit. It's like learning to relax, walking in the green. Do you know what I mean? Hearing birds tweet, they have an effect.
The plants, do you know what I mean? As well in the tree.
They have an effect, and they learn you to get that relaxed feeling happening. Do you know what I mean? And it can be sitting quietly. Do you know what I mean? Which all seem like hollow, flowery in early recovery, and you start experiencing it. Do you know what I mean? And you might.
Well, it's the complete opposite of the chaos that we have in drinking and drugs, isn't it?
And I think, I mean, for a lot of people, I mean, I was very lucky from a very early age. I had a very firm belief in God. But as I slid down that, you know, slippery path, I felt he'd abandoned me. I felt worthless. I thought, how, you know, every single time that I tried to stop and I failed and then tried again and failed and created more chaos in everybody else's lives and in my own. It's like, how could he be even interested in me any longer? And now I understood right at the end, when I nearly did join the rest of the angels, I'd abandoned him. He'd never abandoned me. He's there 24/7, and now that is an enormous source of comfort. You know, you say about love, and there is for my children, for John, for, you know, other people that I meet and things, but that's all temporal. I know there is a part of me that is not this, that is my spirit, the trueness, the essence of me, that is pure, that always is, that will go on, and that is the part that connects without all the nonsense going on out there, without all the nonsense going on in my head, because my head can tell me all sorts of stories half the time. But my essence is connected. I mean, and that's comforting.
You're absolutely right when you mentioned the opposite, because this disease is a disease of opposites. Everything is the opposite with this disease.
But life is that as well, isn't it?
Well, this. Some people might think this is strange for me to say this, but acquiring this disease it has been the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. That having this disease has changed my life. I mean, my life is completely the opposite of what it was. I mean, any mood-altering substance is a false spirituality, because anybody who takes a drink or a drug takes it to feel good. Mm-hmm. That's why people get introduced to drugs, because it's a good feeling. But it's a false spirituality. Mm-hmm. It promises you everything and delivers nothing. So the emotional bond has to be broke with that, and you have to go to the truth. It's the truth that sets you free. Mm-hmm. Whatever way you enter into spirituality, it must be towards the truth. So this is a disease where you're only as sick as your secrets. So you have to face yourself. Recovery is an inside job. You have to go within yourself. Now that journey within yourself, the process of transformation, as you'll obviously know, George, I mean, it demands a great deal of honesty. And you know, when you encounter that side of yourself,
it's all honesty.
It's
just all, yeah. There's no compromise. It's all honesty.
Yeah. And when you start feeling that, after a year of being sober, and that year, you know, it was difficult for me. But my emotions were changing, because all addicts are psychologically and emotionally immature. Mm-hmm. And we're facing the big world again, and you know, you'll have to watch how we go. And that first year for me was a big learning curve in all ways. But after that year, when I started to feel something new arriving within me, and it was stimulating me in a way that only drink could, that's when things really started to change with me. I was beginning to be stimulated and have feelings, such powerful feelings, like love, what you say. Then I knew that I had been profoundly changed. So, I mean, I'm not talking about a spiritual conversion here. I'm talking out of religious context here. I'm talking about connectedness. I'm talking about being awake, and the environment started to have an effect on me where I felt connected to something bigger than myself. And that spirituality counteracts this disease, as it helps. Spirituality is getting used with a lot of mental health issues these days, and there's great research coming even with spirituality and Alzheimer's from China, even a circular state. So spirituality is very real. It's a real force, and it counteracts the disease for many, many reasons.
You're never going to believe it, but we're never going to get through it all tonight. We haven't got to Affinity Lodge, which we'll have on the website tomorrow. We've nearly done 60 minutes. That's how quickly it's gone. And need to round up, okay? There's so much ground we haven't covered, but just quickly before we go, I'd like to give our viewers and audience some of the comments that have been made about the book. A rare gem and highly recommended. Let's see what's going on inside your head, first class. Having read many books on the subject, and I have an extensive library, this is up there with the best. Real biological need for relief, whether trapped in the prison of addiction or caught up in the ripple effect, this information goes right to the source. Well, that's the book, The Secret Disease of Addiction. My guests have been Jane and John. Not Janet and Jane, I believe somebody was saying earlier on. There's a kids' book or programme, is there? I didn't get any of the tongue-tied stuff. Let me briefly tell you in the last minute about our show tomorrow evening. We've actually got Ben in with us this evening over there. Ben, from XLR? Alexa. I'm a Scouser, trust me to get that. Tony, I apologise.
Fellas.
What are we going to be talking about tomorrow night?
We're going to be talking about abstinence-based accommodation, maybe spirituality. Maybe a bit of my story as well.
We'd love that. Yeah. We'd love that.
Okay.
It's our final show tomorrow evening. We've done 10. We're going to tell you how many guests, what's been said, what we've covered. There's been so much. Tonight's show you can watch again at any time in the comfort of your own home, on your iPods, on your iPhone, what? MP4. I don't even know what one of those is, but I know it's a gadgety thing. There's so much to catch up with. Watch it in the comfort of your own home. Anywhere else, pass it on. It's gone. Time's over. Recovery should be fun, but some days it hurts, and I must have forgotten loads tonight. There's loads on there, but good night and God bless.